Travel all over the countryside, ask the Leylands, ask the Leylands. Travel all over the countryside, ask the Leyland brothers. Whatever it is that you want to see, ask the Leylands, ask the Leylands. No matter whatever that happens to be, ask the Leyland brothers. Come on, me in and then join in the fun. Travel all over Australia.
In this episode of Ask the Leyland Brothers, we cover quite a big territory. We start off in New Zealand. Down here in the south of the South Island, we have a look at Fiordland, the fantastic Fiordland, and fly into Milford Sound. Then we go to Bullion in Queensland to have a look at the training of cockatoos for the Cockatoo Circus there.
And for our final story, we travel to Western Australia, to the famous gold mining town of Kalgoorlie. We look not only at the town itself, but the way in which gold is produced.
We're in the south part of the South Island of New Zealand because we have two letters here. One from Mrs. Rita Steele of East Brisbane in Queensland, who says she'd like to see the Milford Sounds area, and a similar one from Mrs. Mavis Stuckey of Mascot in New South Wales, who says, next time you're in New Zealand, could you show us Quill Lake and Sutherland Falls? My husband, son and myself spent a month in the South Island earlier this year and toured around, but unfortunately we couldn't go everywhere, and this is one site I'd really like to see. Fiordland is one of my favourite places. Well, Mr. Stuckey and Mrs. Steele, there are many ways to see the area. You can take a car, you can walk, or you can take a boat trip.
Lake Tiano is the largest of the southern lakes, 53 kilometres long and 10 kilometres wide, with a total area of 343 square kilometres. Charter boats operate out of Tiano and provide a good way to see some of the fjords. Tiano is a popular trout and salmon fishing area. Boats are not the only way to see Fiordland.
We think one of the best ways to see Fiordland is by air, and we're going to take a bird's eye view with the Fiordland Aero Club.
It's not expensive to charter a Cessna from the Fiordland Aero Club at Tiano, and it's one of the most spectacular ways to see the rugged beauty of this impressive region. We leave early in the morning to fly over Lake Tiano, heading north to the snow-capped peaks of Milford Sound. The experienced pilots from the Aero Club can get you into some fantastic positions to photograph the incredible beauty of the snow-capped peaks in Fiordland National Park. The Fiordland National Park is the largest in New Zealand and one of the largest in the world. It is 1,223,600 hectares of grand and impressive scenery, containing some of New Zealand's most spectacular natural attractions. Before we can land, we have to circle down inside the sound. Milford Sound is one of New Zealand's finest fjords, enclosed by walls that rise 1,200 metres vertically from the sea. A fjord is formed where the sea enters a deeply excavated trough after the ice has melted away. The annual rainfall here ranks with the highest in New Zealand, a phenomenal 6,240 millimetres. Our pilot points out Bullion Falls. The Maoris knew about Milford Sound. They visited here to collect the highly prized teardrop greenstone long before Europeans arrived. There are three ways to reach Milford Sound: by air as we are, by a winding mountain road that passes through tunnels in the ranges, or by walking along the famous Milford Track. There is accommodation at Milford in the form of motels and a hostel. Milford Sound is renowned for its mirror reflections. It's dominated by Mitre Peak, 1,691 metres high. A short walk brings us to Bullion Falls, cascading 161 metres into the Sound. These falls go up as well as down. They hit a rock ledge and bounce up in a gigantic fountain before continuing their plunge to the rocks below. We take off to look at the famous Milford Track and Sutherland Falls. Known as the finest walk in the world, the Milford Track climbs over this ridge called McKinnon Pass, not far from Sutherland Falls. Huts are placed at strategic intervals along the 53-kilometre walk. This one on McKinnon Pass has a commanding view down the Arthur Valley to Milford Sound. At the head of the Arthur Valley is Sutherland Falls, one of the world's highest. These magnificent falls are named after their discoverer, a Scottish sealer, Donald Sutherland, who pioneered much of the Milford Track in the late 1800s. The falls are fed by the steep-walled Quill Lake, named after William Quill, who discovered the source of the falls when he climbed from the bottom to the top in 3.5 hours. That was in 1890, and it has only been climbed once since, by a track guide in 1950, and it took him 6 hours. The Sutherland Falls are New Zealand's highest falls at 580 metres. It is sites like this that make Fiordland one of New Zealand's most talked about scenic areas.
We're 26 kilometres from Brisbane at Beenleigh, at the Bullion's African Lion Safari. We're here to watch a very special performance, not of the African lions, but of trained cockatoos, because Mrs. Judith Clark of Geelong and Victoria wrote, "Early this year I purchased a young cockatoo. Not knowing too much about them, I wrote to Elizabeth Gage and her husband, who train cockatoos. I wonder if you could show this on your program." Well, Mrs. Clark, we're going to have a look at the performance and also how they're trained.
Matt and Elizabeth Gage operate the Cockatoo Circus at Bullion's African Lion Safari. Matt's trained cockies put on 2 performances a day, and they always attract a good crowd.
Come on, that's a good boy, yes, all right. And you sit there. That's a good boy. Okay. Ready to start the act?
Matt has 10 cockatoos in his miniature circus, but only 4 are trained. They're all named after bushrangers. Some of them are Ned Kelly, Ben Hall, Molly and Frank.
Okay, come on, keep going. That's better, yes. This is Molly, and she is a little female cockatoo, and that's a chariot. She's sitting there. That's a good girl. Just wait there. And come on, Frank.
Molly in the chariot was a backyard cocky in a cage before she came to live with Matt. Her previous owner's neighbours complained of the noise she made, and she had to leave. Luckily for Molly, her owner had seen Matt's Cockatoo Circus, and he gave her to Matt to see if he could train her. After each performance, the birds are rewarded with their favourite food. Each cocky likes something different. When Matt discovers each bird's particular favourite, he has some handy to reward his performers. Frank is the barrel rolling expert.
That's good. That's all right. Yes, that's great. That's the idea, yeah. Nice and steady, that's right. Good boy. A little bit further. That's good. Just a little bit. All right, that's a good boy. Really.
Molly once again showing her versatility. Matt began his career training seals and dolphins until he saw an American film of trained birds and decided that he would train some cockies. As far as Matt can ascertain, he has the only trained cockatoos in Australia.
Good girl. Good girl. That's it. Yes, all right. That's all right. Just keep moving. Come on. That's good. That's all right. Yes, come on. That's good. Come on, jump up on the T-bar. Jump up on that. Jump up on it. Come on, jump up. Right. Good. That's it. Matt, how do you go about teaching each bird to do its particular trick? The process involved is the same as with mammals. You shape the act. You start from very, very minute beginnings. Yeah. Initially, there is, like, take the bicycle, for instance, which has got quite a few moving parts in it. But initially, the bicycle is stationary, the pedals are not moving, and the bird gets rewarded for just sitting up on those pedals. And without any movement at all. Because initially the bird is very frightened of something like this. It's something very strange, something he's never encountered before. Well, the most important thing is the reinforcement, the reward for the bird. And from being stationary, as I said, the bicycle, would you sit up there please? That's right. The bird learns to just sit there like he does now with his feet on the pedals, and then he learns gradually to go from A to B. The bird realizes after a while that he has to go from one point to another point to get his reward. Matt, can all the birds do all the tricks, or are they just one bird per act? Yes, there is. Each bird learns an average of 3, maybe 4 acts, never more than that. And I've got 4 performing birds, so there's altogether about 16 acts in the show. And that's for 2 reasons. Firstly, if you rely too heavily on one bird, and one day, because they're very moody, you see, sometimes they decide not to perform, and then you have got no show left. And secondly, they can learn more behaviours because they're intelligent enough, but I feel that there's less confusion in the animal's mind if you stop at 3 or 4 acts.
Matt is always devising new acts as he trains new birds to perform. It takes about 3 months of patience and perseverance to teach a bird a new act.
How's that? How's that? Oops. Oh. Right, come on, let's give it a try. Come on, that's a good boy. Yes, here we go. You be very quick. All right, you be very quick. Come on. Quick. That's it. That's a good boy. Come on. How about covering me up a little like that? That's a good boy. Yes, good boy.
The birds love Matt, but if a stranger gets too close, you could end up with a sharp beak wrapped around his finger. Matt hopes in the future to train some dingoes and build up an all-Australian performing animal show.
Well, Mrs. Clark, we enjoyed the performance of the trained cockatoos, and we hope you did too. And we'd like to thank you for asking us to show them on television.
In Western Australia, it's not only the radiant setting sun which glows with gold. Here at Kalgoorlie, in the heart of what was the world's richest gold-bearing deposit, the fabulous Golden Mile, we've come to answer a request from Susan Cusack from Gosford in New South Wales, who wrote and asked to see Kalgoorlie today, and to see a real gold mine in action and show how the gold is smelted.
The history of the discovery of gold in Kalgoorlie actually goes back to 1892, when the gold mining town of Kalgoorlie was in its heyday. Now, Kalgoorlie is about 40 miles west of here, down that way. Well, Patrick Hannon came here on the 15th of June 1893 and found gold, and that was how Kalgoorlie began. Now, this is Hannon Street that we're standing in at the moment, which is the main street of Kalgoorlie, and this is a statue here of Patrick Hannon. Now, the interesting thing is that Kalgoorlie developed rather rapidly. The road that went between Coolgardie and Kalgoorlie was used by horse-drawn carriages and camel-drawn wagons. It was only a track in those days. Enterprising businessmen came along and set up tents on the side of the road, and eventually Hannon Street began to develop, and so Kalgoorlie was on its way.
Today's modern Kalgoorlie was built on the riches of 39 million ounces of gold, which were extracted from the ground in 80 years. And although the poppet heads of the famous gold mines on the Golden Mile are silent now, gold is still produced, but mostly from small outlying operations, like the Daisy mine, run by a syndicate of 4. Working about 700 feet from the surface, with solid rock, the mining work is hard, but for a small show like this, it can pay pretty well. In a week, 4 men can extract around $3,000 worth of gold. But at 4 pennyweight to the tonne, they have to shift a lot of rock to the surface. The shaft is unusually twisted, and each load has to be manhandled twice at different levels before it reaches the top. This type of operation is profitable for the small miner, but the really big mining operators couldn't make it pay. It would cost too much to mechanise it, and they would work out the potential of the ground before the equipment had paid for itself. There are dozens of small mining operations like the Daisy scattered throughout the Kalgoorlie district, and they all bring their ore to town to the government-run battery to have their gold extracted. This is the only battery left running in Kalgoorlie now. The ore is first crushed by heavy mechanical hammers. Then it is passed over a large specially treated plate. The gold is heavier than the rock dust and sinks to the plate, adhering to the sticky mercury compound. At the end of a run, the gold is scraped from the plate, and the sticky mixture of mercury and gold is washed. The gold is eventually purified by chemicals. The battery method of extracting the gold is not 100% efficient. Some gold is missed, but with the millions of tonnes of ore from the Charlotte mine, the last of the big commercial mines in Kalgoorlie, every possible fragment of gold must be extracted. So they smelt the gold-bearing ore by a totally different method. The ore is first crushed to gravel-sized pieces and conveyed to the mill. Here the ore is tumbled in huge cement mixer-like mills with thousands of iron balls to reduce the ore to a watery grey sludge. This sludge is treated with chemicals and passed through several large settling tanks to produce a final ore concentrate, which is poured into the furnace and heated for about 8 hours to separate the gold from the impurities which are not wanted. Until a few years ago, this furnace was working every day, but now with a reduction in gold mining in Kalgoorlie, the concentrate is allowed to accumulate and is smelted down only once a week. With the crystalline impurities removed, we see the shining, pure gold for the first time. Before the process is finished, these domes of solid gold are remelted in another smaller furnace so they can be poured into the familiar bullion bars. From today's pour, 3 bars are produced. Each bar must be weighed and date stamped for identification. The total value from today's pour, about $250,000. The hustle and bustle of the gold rush days may be gone, but the magic of the yellow metal hasn't changed any more than the sun setting in the golden west of Kalgoorlie.
Travel all over the countryside, ask the Leylands, ask the Leylands. Travel all over the countryside, ask the Leyland brothers. Whatever it is that you want to see, ask the Leylands, ask the Leylands. No matter whatever that happens to be, ask the Leyland brothers. Come on, me in it and join in the fun. Travel all over Australia.